Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery and watched the stars bend around them as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The year was 2387, and humanity had been exploring space for over 200 years, but they had never seen anything like what waited for them near the Proxima System 12 massive ships hung in space like sleeping giants. Each one was different from the others, and Jake could tell they came from different worlds and different species. The smallest ship was still 3 times larger than the Discovery, and the biggest one looked like it could swallow a moon commander. Lisa Bennett walked up beside Jake and looked at the sensor readings. She was the ship's diplomatic officer, and her job was to make first contact with new species go smoothly. But this was not what anyone had expected when they left Earth 6 months ago. "Captain, they are sending us a message," said Lieutenant Tony Garcia from the communication station. "It is coming through on multiple frequencies, and they are using a universal translation protocol." Jake nodded, and Tony put the message on the main screen. A figure appeared that looked almost human, but with silver skin and eyes that glowed with soft blue light. When it spoke, its voice was calm but carried the weight of great age. "Human vessel, you are commanded to approach the Council ships for immediate judgment. You will surrender your weapons and submit to boarding. Any resistance will result in the destruction of your ship and the quarantine of your entire species." The bridge fell silent. Jake looked at Lisa and saw his own confusion reflected in her eyes. They had come here to explore a new star system, not to face some kind of trial. "Send a response," Jake told Tony. "Tell them we come in peace and ask what charges we face." Silver Being appeared again after a few minutes. "You are charged with aggressive expansion and threat to galactic peace. The Zephyrians have filed a formal complaint against your species. You will be judged under the authority of the Galactic Council." Dr. Alex Carter stepped forward from his science station. He was the ship's expert on alien life, and he had been studying the Council ships since they arrived. "Captain, I am reading 12 different ship designs. These represent 12 different species, and some of these energy signatures are incredibly old. I think we are dealing with a government that has been in power for thousands of years." Lisa moved to her station and began pulling up everything humanity knew about this region of space. "We have never heard of any Galactic Council," she said, "and we certainly never had contact with any species called the Zephyrians." The Silver Being spoke again, and this time other figures appeared beside it. Jake could see a creature made of what looked like living crystal, something that might have been a plant but moved like an animal, and others that were so alien he could not even guess their nature. "Ignorance is not a defense," the Silver Being said. "Your species has violated the territories of 17 inhabited worlds during your expansion. You have shown aggressive tendencies and rapid militarization. The doctrine of predetermined guilt applies to your case." Dr. Carter looked up from his readings with alarm. "Captain, they are talking about judging us not for what we have done, but for what they think we might do in the future." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. These beings were talking about judging all of humanity based on predictions and assumptions. "What exactly does this trial involve?" he asked the screen. "Your species will be confined to your home system." The Crystal Being spoke with a voice like wind chimes. "If you are found guilty of future threat potential, your world will be sterilized. To prevent galactic contamination." The words hit the bridge crew like a physical blow. They were talking about destroying Earth and killing 7 billion people because of what humanity might do someday. Lisa stepped forward, and Jake could see the determination in her eyes. "There must be some way to defend ourselves. Every legal system has some form of appeal or representation." The Silver Being looked surprised for the first time. "You invoke the right of advocacy. This has not been requested in over 3,000 years. I am requesting it now," Lisa said firmly. "I demand the right to speak for my species." The council beings began talking among themselves in languages that sounded like music and static and sounds that had no human equivalent. Finally, the silver being turned back to them. The ancient law still stands. You have one solar cycle to prepare your defense. But know this, human, no species has successfully overturned a council judgment in 3 millennia. Your fate is already decided. Jake watched the council ships begin to move into formation around the Discovery. They were not prisoners yet, but they were definitely not free to leave. The weight of representing all humanity had just fallen on the shoulders of his crew. Tony, send a message to Earth immediately, Jake ordered. Tell them what has happened and that we need every piece of information about human exploration and contact with other species. Lisa was already working at her station, pulling up legal databases and historical records. Alex, I need you to analyze everything we can learn about these council species. If we are going to defend humanity, we need to understand who is judging us. The Discovery hung in space surrounded by ships, older than human civilization, while its crew prepared to fight for the survival of their entire species. Jake looked out at the alien vessels and wondered if humanity had finally met something it could not overcome. Through courage and determination, the trial would begin soon, and the fate of Earth hung in the balance. Lisa Bennett sat in the Discovery's conference room, surrounded by data tablets and holographic displays showing everything humanity had learned about the Galactic Council in the past week. The trial would begin in 12 hours, and she felt the weight of 7 billion lives pressing down on her shoulders. Dr. Sam Rodriguez sat across from her, reviewing historical records they had managed to download from the council databases. He was a historian who specialized in legal systems, and what he had found was not encouraging. Lisa, the pattern is clear, Sam said while highlighting sections of text on his display. Every species that has faced council judgment in the last 3,000 years has been found guilty. The council operates on something called the doctrine of predetermined guilt, which means they decide guilt based on computer models that predict future behavior. Lisa rubbed her tired eyes and looked at the evidence they would have to present. Earth had sent everything they could through the quantum communication array, but most of it showed exactly what the council expected to see: wars, conflicts, and rapid military expansion as humanity spread to the stars. The prosecution is being led by High Arbiter Veltar from the Hegemony. Lisa continued reading from her notes. His species was nearly wiped out by something called the Scourge War about 800 years ago. The council failed to stop that threat in time, and millions died. Sam nodded grimly. That explains why he sees threats everywhere. He probably thinks humanity is just another scourge waiting to happen. Chief Engineer Danny Clark entered the conference room with Captain Jake Morrison right behind him. Danny had been working around the clock to establish better communications with Earth, and his eyes were red from exhaustion. We got through to Admiral Karen White, Danny announced. The entire human fleet is mobilizing, but not for war. The Admiral says they are preparing something called Operation Peaceful Harbor. Jake sat down and activated a holographic display showing the solar system around Earth. Every human ship is being recalled to Earth orbit. Every weapon system is being powered down, and every military base is standing down to minimum alert. Lisa looked confused. That seems like surrender. How does that help our case? Because, Jake said with a slight smile, we are going to prove that humans can choose restraint even when facing extinction. No species in galactic history has ever voluntarily disarmed while under threat. The plan was risky beyond belief, but Lisa could see the logic. If the council judged species based on their predicted behavior, then humanity needed to show behavior that broke all their prediction models. Danny activated another display showing technical specifications. I have been analyzing council technology, and I think I found something important. Their prediction computers are incredibly advanced, but they only work with species that follow predictable patterns. They have never encountered a species that can change its fundamental nature through conscious choice. Sam leaned forward with interest. Are you saying their computers cannot predict what humans will do? Exactly, Danny replied. Human behavior includes factors like conscience, sacrifice, and moral growth that their models do not account for. We are literally unpredictable to them. Lisa felt the first spark of hope she had experienced in days. Then our defense strategy has to focus on proving that humanity is fundamentally different from every other species they have judged. The next morning, Lisa stood in the council chamber aboard the massive Hegemony flagship. The chamber was huge, with floating platforms for each of the 12 council species. High Arbiter Veltar stood on a platform made of dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Veltar was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 arms that moved independently of each other. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone who had never been challenged. Humans of the vessel. Discovery, you stand accused of aggressive expansion and future threat potential to galactic civilization. The evidence against your species is overwhelming, and the judgment has been decided by our prediction algorithms. Lisa stepped forward onto the small platform designated for her. She felt very small surrounded by these ancient alien beings, but she kept her voice steady and strong. Honored council members, I stand here not to deny that humans are capable of violence, but to prove that we are also capable of something your prediction models cannot account for, the choice to be better than our nature demands. Veltar activated a holographic display, showing human military actions over the past century. Your species has engaged in 47 armed conflicts since achieving spaceflight. You have established military bases on every world you colonize. Your population growth and resource consumption follow the exact pattern of 16 previous species that became galactic threats. Yes, Lisa replied calmly. And every one of those conflicts ended with humans choosing peace over total victory. Every military base exists to protect colonists, not to threaten neighbors. Every resource we take, we also work to renew and restore. The crystal being called Zeftor spoke with its wind chime voice. Pretty words, human, but your actions speak louder. The Zephyrians reported that your colony ships ignored their territorial markers and landed on sacred crystal gardens. Lisa had been prepared for this accusation. The Zephyrians never attempted to communicate with our ships. Their territorial markers used electromagnetic frequencies that human equipment reads as natural. Stellar radiation. When we learned of the mistake, we immediately began relocating our colonies and restoring the city. Damaged areas after you were caught, Veltar said with what might have been a smile. Reactive guilt is not the same as moral choice. This was the moment Lisa had been waiting for. She activated her own holographic display showing real-time images from Earth orbit. Hundreds of human ships hung in space around their homeworld with their weapon systems clearly powered down and their crews standing at attention. As we speak, every human military vessel has returned to Earth and disarmed itself, Lisa announced. We face possible extinction, and our response is to prove we choose peace even when we could choose war. The council chamber fell silent. Several of the alien beings began talking to each other in languages that sounded like music and electronic noise. Finally, an ancient being that looked like it was made of starlight spoke for the first time. In 3 millennia, no species has ever disarmed while facing council judgment. This action is outside all prediction models. Veltar looked genuinely confused for the first time since the trial began. This proves nothing. It could be a trick or desperation. It proves, Lisa said firmly, that humans can choose to trust in justice even when facing beings who have already decided to destroy us. It proves we would rather die as who we choose to be than live as what fear would make us become. The ancient starlight being leaned forward, with what might have been interest. Tell us, human advocate, what makes your species believe they can change the fundamental nature of intelligent life? Lisa took a deep breath and prepared to present humanity's greatest secret, that they had been preparing for this moment for generations, by consciously evolving their own moral nature. The real trial was just beginning. The council chamber hummed with the sound of 12 different species talking among themselves as Lisa Bennett prepared to present her evidence. She had spent the night going through personnel files sent from Earth, looking for the perfect examples of human nature that would convince these ancient beings. High Arbiter Veltar stood on his dark platform with his 4 arms crossed in what was clearly a gesture of skepticism. Human advocate, you claim your species can choose to change its nature, but we have seen no evidence beyond empty gestures. Present your proof or accept judgment. Lisa activated her holographic display and the image of Dr. Amy Foster appeared in the center of the chamber. Amy was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and tired eyes who had spent most of her life negotiating peace treaties. I call as my first witness Dr. Amy Foster, who ended the Mars Colonial War through methods your prediction models would call impossible. Dr. Foster's image began to speak and her words filled the chamber. The Mars Colonial War began when the independent colonies declared separation from Earth government. Both sides had legitimate grievances and both sides were prepared to fight to the death. The conflict lasted 3 years and cost thousands of lives. Veltar interrupted the testimony. Your species fought a civil war that proves our point about human aggression. Please let her finish, Lisa replied calmly. Amy continued her testimony. I was sent to Mars not as a military commander but as a negotiator. My orders were to find a solution that both sides could accept without either side having to surrender their core beliefs. This took 18 months of careful listening and creative problem solving. The crystal being Zephyr made a sound like breaking glass. Negotiation after violence has already begun is meaningless. The damage was already done. Amy's image looked directly at Zephyr. The damage was real, but so was the healing. The final peace agreement did not just end the fighting, it created a new form of government that gave both Earth and Mars what they truly needed. Mars got independence and Earth got continued cooperation. Neither side won the war, but both sides won the peace. Lisa highlighted key sections of the peace treaty on her display. The Mars Accords became the model for peaceful independence movements on 6 other human colonies. Dr. Foster proved that humans can fight for principles without fighting for dominance. The ancient starlight being called Kithara spoke in a voice like distant thunder. Interesting, but one example does not prove a species' wide capacity for growth. Lisa was ready for this objection. The holographic display changed to show Captain Ben Taylor standing on the bridge of a rescue ship called the Mercy's Hand. Ben was a stocky man with calloused hands and the bearing of someone who had spent his life saving people. Captain Taylor commanded rescue operations during the Titan Station disaster, Lisa announced. This event occurred during the Europa War when Earth and Europa were actively fighting each other. Ben's recorded testimony began to play. The disaster happened when Titan Station's fusion reactors started going critical. There were 12,000 civilians on that station, including 4,000 children. The Europa Navy was 3 days away and our fleet was 6 days out. Veltar leaned forward with obvious interest. What did your fleet do? We broke off our attack on Europa's shipyards and diverted every ship to Titan Station, Ben replied. We knew it would give Europa time to reinforce their defenses and probably cost us the war, but we could not let those people die. The council chamber filled with the sounds of alien conversation as the beings tried to understand this concept. Several species seemed genuinely confused by the idea of choosing a rescue over victory. Ben continued his testimony. My ship, the Mercy's Hand, went in first even though Titan Station was in Europa-controlled space. We took heavy fire from their defense platforms, but we kept broadcasting that we were there to save lives, not fight battles. Lisa highlighted the rescue statistics. Captain Taylor's ship saved 9,000 lives, including 3,000 Europa citizens. They lost 14 ships and over 200 crew members. Europa eventually stopped shooting and helped with the rescue. Zephyrd's crystalline form flashed with different colors. This makes no strategic sense. Why sacrifice military advantage for enemy civilians? Because they were not enemies, Ben said simply. They were people in danger, and helping people in danger is what humans do regardless of politics or war. The ancient being Kythera moved closer to Lisa's platform. You present these examples as proof of moral choice, but how do we know these? Actions represent your species rather than exceptional individuals. Lisa had been waiting for this question. Because I have one more witness who will explain how these moral choices became part of human culture. The display changed to show Professor Helen Wright standing in a lecture hall at the University of Luna. Helen was an elderly woman with white hair and eyes that sparkled with intelligence. Professor Wright developed the ethical frameworks that guide human expansion into space, Lisa explained. She will testify about humanity's deliberate moral evolution. Helen's image began to speak with the authority of someone who had spent decades thinking about right and wrong. For the past 2 centuries, humanity has been engaged in what we call conscious ethical development. We study our own history and learn from our mistakes not just as individuals, but as an entire species. Veltar made a dismissive gesture with one of his 4 arms. All species learn from history. This proves nothing special about humans. But most species learn only practical lessons about survival and efficiency, Helen replied. Humans also learn moral lessons about how to be better people. We teach our children not just what they need to know to succeed, but what they need to know to choose right over wrong. Lisa activated a new display showing human educational curricula from across the colonies. Every human child learns about the mistakes of the past and the principles needed to avoid repeating them. We have institutionalized the process of becoming better people. Helen continued her testimony. The examples you have seen today are not exceptions. They are the natural result of a species that has decided to grow beyond its destructive instincts. We know humans are capable of terrible things, but we choose every day to be capable of wonderful things instead. Kythera's starlight form pulsed with what might have been excitement. You claim to have solved the fundamental problem of intelligent life, the conflict between survival instinct and moral behavior. We have not solved it, Helen admitted. We work on it every day and sometimes we fail. But we never stop trying, and we never stop believing that we can choose to be better than our worst impulses. The council chamber fell silent as the 12 ancient beings processed what they had heard. Lisa could see that some of them were beginning to understand that humanity represented something completely new in their experience. Veltar broke the silence with obvious frustration in his voice. Even if these examples are representative, they prove only that humans can occasionally choose altruism over aggression. This does not address the fundamental threat your rapid expansion poses to galactic stability. Lisa smiled for the first time. Since the trial began? Actually, Arbiter Veltar, it does address that threat because I am about to prove that humanity's approach to expansion is unlike anything that the Council has ever seen before. The real test was about to begin. The ancient being called Kythera moved to the center of the council chamber, and her starlight form began to pulse with patterns that hurt human eyes to look at directly. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of eons. Human advocate, you have presented evidence that your species possesses unusual moral flexibility, but there is something you must understand about this. Council, before we can proceed further, Lisa felt a chill run down her spine as the other council members began to shift uncomfortably on their platforms. Something important was about to be revealed. For 3 millennia, we have judged species based on predictive models because we lost the ability to judge them based on hope, Kithara continued. We have become so afraid of another catastrophe like the Scourge War that we destroy potential threats before they can become actual threats. High Arbiter Veltar made a sharp gesture with his 4 arms. Ancient One, this discussion is not appropriate for alien ears. It is exactly appropriate, Kithara replied, and her starlight form flared brighter. This human has shown us something we had forgotten, that intelligent beings can choose to grow beyond their nature. We have not seen such growth in ourselves for over 2,000 years. Dr. Sam Rodriguez leaned forward from his position near Lisa's platform. He had been studying council records, and what Kithara was saying matched patterns he had noticed in their legal decisions. You are telling us that the council itself has stopped evolving, Lisa said carefully. That you judge others for threats you see in yourselves. The crystalline being Zephyr flashed with angry red light. We maintain order across 12,000 inhabited systems. Our methods preserve peace. Your methods preserve stagnation, Lisa replied boldly. You prevent conflict by preventing change, and you prevent growth by preventing risk. That is not peace. That is slow death. Captain Jake Morrison stepped forward from where he had been watching the proceedings. With respect to the Council, we have been monitoring galactic communications for decades. We know about the unresolved conflicts your system has created. Veltar's pale blue skin darkened with what was clearly anger. Human monitoring of Council communications is a violation of 17 different treaties. Treaties we never signed with species who never contacted us, Jake replied calmly. And what we learned is that your system of predetermined guilt has created more problems than it solved. Dr. Sam Rodriguez activated his own holographic display showing detailed analyses of galactic conflicts over the past 1,000 years. The Miners Guild War on Kepler 442 has been ongoing for 6 centuries because the Council ruled that both sides were equally guilty without investigating the actual causes of the conflict. Lisa picked up the thread of Sam's argument. The indigenous rights movement in the Outer Spiral collapsed into terrorism because the Council predetermined that their grievances were invalid based on statistical models rather than examining the facts. The hegemony civil war that nearly destroyed Veltar's own people lasted 200 years because the Council refused to intervene until it was almost too late. Jake added quietly. Veltar's 4 arms trembled with suppressed rage. Those conflicts were necessary sacrifices to prevent larger wars. Were they, Lisa asked? Or were they the result of a system so afraid of making wrong decisions that it stopped making any real decisions at all? Kithara's starlight form pulsed with what might have been sadness. The human speaks truth that we have been avoiding for centuries. We have become judges who rule from fear rather than wisdom. The council chamber erupted with sounds of argument as the 12 species began debating among themselves. Some voices supported Kithara, while others demanded that the humans be silenced. Lisa raised her voice above the chaos. I propose that the galaxy does not need judges who rule from fear, but advocates who guide from understanding. Humanity offers not to be judged, but to serve as mediators using our perspective on moral growth and ethical choice. The chamber fell silent as if someone had thrown a switch. The idea of the accused species offering to become judges themselves was so unprecedented that none of the council members seemed to know how to respond. Veltar was the first to find his voice. This is beyond arrogance. Your species wants to replace a system that has maintained galactic peace for 3 millennia. Has it maintained peace? Jake asked. Or has it maintained control through fear while allowing countless smaller conflicts to fester and grow? Dr. Alex Carter stepped forward with his analysis of council technology. Your prediction models are incredibly sophisticated, but they have one fatal flaw. They assume that intelligent behavior follows predictable patterns. Human behavior includes factors like conscience, sacrifice, and hope that cannot be predicted by any computer. Lisa seized on Alex's words. What if the galaxy had mediators who understand that beings can choose to change and grow? What if conflicts were resolved through understanding rather than predetermined punishment? The ancient being Kythera moved closer to Lisa's platform. You propose to judge not whether beings are guilty or innocent, but whether they are willing to become better than they are. Exactly, Lisa replied. Restorative justice rather than punitive justice. Growth rather than punishment. Hope rather than fear. Sam activated another display showing detailed case studies. We have analyzed 17 major conflicts that the Council failed to resolve fairly. In every case, human principles of understanding and redemption could have led to better outcomes. The Council members continued to argue, but Lisa could see that several of them were beginning to consider the possibility that their ancient system might be flawed. Veltura made one last desperate argument. Even if your principles have merit, your species lacks the authority and experience to implement them on a galactic scale. Then give us a trial period, Lisa suggested. Test our methods on conflicts your system has failed to resolve. If we succeed, you can gradually expand our role. If we fail, you can return to your old methods. Kythera began to glow brighter as she considered this proposal. A trial period would allow us to evaluate human methods without abandoning our own safeguards. It would also allow the Council to observe whether humans practice what they preach when given real responsibility. Added the plant-like being called Verdanus. Jake nodded respectfully to all the Council members. We understand that trust must be earned. We are willing to prove ourselves through actions rather than words. The debate continued for hours, but Lisa could feel the momentum shifting. The idea that had seemed impossible when she first suggested it was beginning to seem not just possible, but necessary. Finally, Kythera called for order and the chamber fell silent. The Council will vote on whether to grant humanity a probationary role as galactic mediators. This vote is unprecedented and will require unanimous agreement to change our fundamental approach to justice. Lisa held her breath as the ancient beings consulted among themselves. The fate of not just humanity, but potentially the entire galaxy hung in the balance. When the voting began, she realized that humans were about to learn whether their greatest strength, the ability to change and grow, was something the rest of the galaxy was ready to embrace. The vote was 11-1 in favor of granting humanity a probationary role as galactic mediators. Only High Arbiter Veltura voted against the proposal, and even he admitted that the current system needed fundamental changes. 6 months later, Lisa Bennett stood in the renovated council chambers aboard what was now called the UES Mediator. The ship had been completely rebuilt with input from all 12 council species to serve as a mobile mediation center, her first case as a human arbiter involved the centuries-old conflict between the mining guilds of Kepler 442 and the indigenous Moss people. The conflict had raged for over 600 years, with both sides claiming exclusive rights to the crystal-rich mountains of the fourth planet. Captain Jake Morrison sat beside Lisa as they reviewed the case files. The Discovery had been renamed the Mediator, and its mission had changed from exploration to conflict resolution. Jake found the new role more challenging than exploring unknown space, but also more rewarding. The mining guilds claim they have legal contracts dating back 800 years, Jake said while reviewing the documentation. The Moss people claim those contracts were signed under duress and without proper understanding of what they were agreeing to. Chief Engineer Danny Clark entered the conference room with holographic displays of both groups. I have been analyzing the communication records, and I think I found something interesting. Neither side has actually talked to the other in over 3 centuries. They have been fighting through intermediaries and automated systems. Lisa looked up from her reading with surprise. They have been at war for 600 years but have not spoken to each other for 300 years. That explains why the Council's traditional approach failed, Jake observed. They made legal rulings based on documents and precedents, but never addressed the actual relationship between the two groups. The mediator arrived at Kepler 442 3 days later, and Lisa immediately requested face-to-face meetings with both sides. The mining guild representatives were humans and other species who had been working the crystal mines for generations. The Moss people were plant-like beings who communicated through chemical signals and root networks. Guild leader Carl Douglas was a weathered man whose family had been mining crystals on Kepler 442 for 200 years. When he spoke about the Moss people, his voice carried generations of resentment and frustration. Those plant creatures have never understood the concept of property rights, Carl said during his first meeting with Lisa. We have legal documents proving our claim to the mining territories, but they keep sabotaging our equipment and attacking our workers. Lisa listened carefully to Carl's complaints, but she also noticed what he was not saying. Have you ever tried to understand why they object to your mining operations? Why should we? Carl replied with obvious irritation. We have legal contracts and they do not. That should be the end of the discussion. The next day, Lisa met with the Moss people in their underground grove networks. Speaking with them required translation technology that Danny had developed to convert their chemical communications into Wordzelder. Fernroot was the oldest of the Moss people, and her chemical signatures carried the complexity of centuries of experience. When she communicated about the mining guilds, her messages were filled with concepts that had no direct human equivalent. The crystal diggers wound the mountain spirit and poisoned the root waters. Fernroot's translated words appeared on Lisa's display. They take the mountain's blood and give nothing back. The contracts were signed by young shoots who did not understand that crystal veins are the mountain's life force. Lisa began to understand the fundamental disconnect between the two groups. The mining guild saw crystals as valuable resources to be extracted, while the Moss people saw them as living parts of the planet that should not be disturbed. What if there was a way to harvest crystals without wounding the mountain spirit? Lisa asked. Through the translation system, Fernroot's chemical output became more complex as she considered this possibility. If the crystal diggers could learn to take only what the mountain offers freely, there could be harmony between our peoples. Lisa returned to the mediator with an idea that would have been impossible under the old council system. Instead of ruling in favor of one side or the other, she would help both sides find a solution that met their actual needs rather than their stated positions. Dr. Alex Carter had been studying the crystal formations, and he discovered something that neither side had fully understood. The crystals grow in cycles, he explained to Lisa and Jake. The Moss people are right that removing them damages the growth network, but the mining guilds are also right that they need to be harvested to maintain economic viability. What if we could time the harvesting to match the natural growth cycles? Lisa suggested. Take crystals when the mountain is ready to release them rather than when the market demands them. Danny had been working with both groups to develop new mining techniques that would work with the planet's natural systems rather than against them. The Moss people know exactly when each crystal formation is ready for harvest. The mining guilds have the technology to extract crystals without damaging the root networks. The solution required both sides to give up some of their traditional approaches, but it offered both sides something they valued more than their old positions. The mining guilds would get a sustainable crystal supply, and the Moss people would get protection for their sacred mountains. Negotiation process took 3 months, but it resulted in the first peace agreement in 6 centuries. The mining guilds agreed to follow Moss People guidance on when and where to harvest crystals. The Moss People agreed to help optimize crystal growth in exchange for a share of the profits that would fund environmental restoration projects. Captain Jake Morrison watched the signing ceremony from the Mediator's observation deck and marveled at how different this felt from traditional military victories. "No one surrendered, but everyone won," he said to Lisa as they watched Mining Guild and Moss People representatives working together to plan the first cooperative harvest. The success at Kepler 442 led to requests for human mediation from across the galaxy. Species that had been locked in conflict for centuries began to see new possibilities for resolution. High Arbiter Veltar surprised everyone by requesting assignment to work with the human mediation teams. During a private conversation with Lisa, he explained his change of heart. "I spent so many years looking for threats that I forgot to look for opportunities," Veltar admitted. "Your success with the mining guilds and Moss People proved that my people's greatest enemy was not outside threats but our own inability to imagine better solutions." Lisa offered Veltar a position as instructor in the new Galactic Justice Academy that was being established on Luna. "Your experience with the old system is exactly what new mediators need to understand," she told him. "You can teach them about the mistakes to avoid while they learn the principles to embrace." The Academy's first class included students from 47 different species, all learning to apply human principles of restorative justice to their own cultures. Professor Helen Wright served as the head instructor, and her classes on ethical evolution became the foundation of the new mediation approach. Admiral Karen White arrived at Kepler 442 with the first ships of what would become the Galactic Peace Fleet. Instead of warships designed to impose order through force, these vessels were equipped with communication systems, cultural exchange facilities, and mediation technology. The old system prevented conflicts by preventing change, Admiral White explained to the Academy's first graduating class. The new system prevents conflicts by facilitating positive change and growth. Dr. Sam Rodriguez had been documenting the transformation in galactic governance, and his report showed dramatic improvements in conflict resolution across multiple star systems. Human mediation has resolved more long-standing disputes in 2 years than the Council resolved in the previous 2 centuries, he announced at the Academy's graduation ceremony, but Lisa knew that their greatest test was still coming. Deep space monitoring stations had detected signals from the edge of the galaxy that suggested the return of something the original Council had banished rather than destroyed many years ago. The Devourers were coming back, and humanity would soon face the ultimate test of whether their principles of redemption and growth could work with beings that every other species considered irredeemably evil. 5 years after humanity's trial before the Galactic Council, Lisa Bennett stood in the command center of the largest space station ever built. The Harmony Station orbited between Earth and Mars and served as the headquarters for what had become known as the Human Mediation Corps. The transformation of galactic civilization had been remarkable, but the greatest test was approaching. Long-range sensors had confirmed that the Devourers were returning from the edge of the galaxy where they had been banished 3,000 years ago. Admiral Karen White materialized as a hologram beside Lisa's command console. She was commanding the Galactic Peace Fleet from her flagship, the UES Unity, which was currently positioned near the galactic rim. "The Devourer fleet is massive," Karen reported with obvious concern in her voice. "Our scouts count over 10,000 ships, and they are heading directly for the core systems. Every species in the galaxy is demanding that we destroy them before they can reach inhabited space." Lisa studied the tactical displays showing the approaching fleet. The Devourers had been banished by the original Council after a war that devastated dozens of star systems. They were considered the ultimate proof that some species could not be reformed or reasoned with. What do we actually know about why they were banished? Lisa asked Dr. Sam Rodriguez, who had become the chief historian for the mediation. Core Sam activated historical records that painted a grim picture. The Devourers consumed entire ecosystems to fuel their expansion. They showed no interest in negotiation or compromise and seemed driven by an insatiable hunger for resources and territory. Captain Jake Morrison entered the command center with Veltar walking beside him. The former High Arbiter had become one of humanity's most trusted advisors, and his perspective on the approaching crisis was invaluable. My people fought the Devourers during the final campaigns before their banishment, Veltar said with his forearms gesturing to emphasize his words. They seemed incapable of any behavior except consumption and aggression. The Council's decision to banish rather than destroy them was considered an act of mercy. Lisa turned to face the assembled group of advisors and felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. Every precedent and every bit of conventional wisdom said that the Devourers should be destroyed before they could threaten galactic civilization again. Has anyone tried to communicate with them since they were banished? Lisa asked. Communication was attempted during the original war, Sam replied. While checking his records, they never responded to any diplomatic overtures and showed no interest in anything except acquiring more resources. Chief Engineer Danny Clark had been monitoring the long-range scans, and he noticed something that everyone else had missed. The Devourer fleet is moving slowly, and they are sending out what looks like scanning pulses rather than targeting signals. Lisa felt a spark of hope as she considered this observation. Scanning pulses suggest they are trying to gather information rather than prepare for immediate attack. Jake activated the communication systems that connected Harmony Station to every major world in the galaxy. Maybe it is time to try something that has never been attempted before. You want to try talking to them, Veltar said with obvious disbelief. After 3,000 years of banishment, you think they might be interested in negotiation, I think. They might be interested in coming home, Lisa replied quietly. 3,000 years is a long time to think about mistakes and consequences. The proposal to attempt communication with the Devourers was met with fierce resistance from across the Mesos galaxy. Fear of another devastating war made most species prefer the certainty of preemptive attack over the risk of failed diplomacy. Dr. Helen Wright arrived at Harmony Station to help develop the communication strategy. Now in her 80s, she had become the galaxy's leading expert on ethical transformation and redemption. The key question, Helen explained during the strategy session, is whether the Devourers are capable of the same kind of moral growth that humans have demonstrated. If they are, then banishment might have given them the time and motivation to change. Lisa made the decision that would define her legacy as the galaxy's first human arbiter. Despite opposition from most galactic governments, she ordered the peace fleet to approach the Devourer fleet with communication signals rather than weapons. Admiral Karen White reported from the front lines as her ships moved to intercept the returning exiles. We are broadcasting on all frequencies with offers to establish dialogue. So far no response, but they have not opened fire either. The galaxy held its breath as human ships approached beings that had once been considered the ultimate threat to all civilized life. Lisa waited in the command center, knowing that her decision would either vindicate humanity's approach to justice or result in catastrophic failure. Then something unprecedented happened. The Devourer fleet stopped moving and began broadcasting a response. Dr. Alex Carter worked frantically to decode the alien transmission while the entire galaxy waited for news. When he finally succeeded in translating the message it contained, words that no one had expected to hear, "We seek forgiveness," the message said in simple but clear language. We have learned during our exile that consumption without creation leads only to emptiness. We wish to return not as conquerors, but as contributors to galactic civilization. The revelation that the Devourers had spent 3,000 years in Aden years in exile, learning and growing sent shockwaves through every inhabited system. The possibility that even the galaxy's greatest monsters could change challenged every assumption about the nature of evil, and Redemption Lisa proposed something that would have been unthinkable under the old council system. Instead of destroying or re-banishing the Devourers, she suggested bringing them back into galactic society through a carefully monitored reintegration program. Negotiations took place aboard Harmony Station, with representatives from dozens of species watching as humanity attempted to broker peace with beings that had once threatened all life in the galaxy. Lead Devourer negotiator was a being called Hunger Speaker, whose appearance was both terrifying and strangely noble. When it spoke, its voice carried the weight of millennia of regret. "We consumed because we knew no other way to survive," Hunger Speaker explained through translation systems. "Exile taught us that survival without purpose is not life but slow death. We offer our knowledge and strength to help repair the damage we once caused." The final agreement established a series of monitored colonies where the Devourers could demonstrate their commitment to peaceful coexistence. They would work on ecological restoration projects using their advanced biotechnology to heal worlds damaged by past conflicts. Captain Jake Morrison watched the signing ceremony and marveled at how far galactic civilization had come. "5 years ago, we were facing extinction for being too dangerous," he said to Lisa. "Today, we are helping the galaxy's most feared species find redemption." Dr. Helen Wright gave the closing address at the ceremony, and her words captured the transformation that humanity had brought to the galaxy. "We have learned that justice is not about punishing the guilty, but about helping everyone become innocent. We have learned that the greatest strength is not the power to destroy, but the wisdom to forgive and the courage to help others grow." Galaxy had learned that true civilization required not the elimination of threats, but the transformation of enemies into allies. Humanity became the galaxy's judge not through conquest, but through the revolutionary idea that everyone deserves the chance to become better than they are. Years later, when delegations from the Andromeda Galaxy arrived seeking help with their own ancient conflicts, they found a galactic civilization built on principles of growth, redemption, and hope, rather than fear and punishment. Jake Morrison, now serving as Director of Intergalactic Relations, welcomed the Andromedan delegates aboard the massive station that had grown around Harmony Station. As he showed them examples of successful mediation and transformation, he reflected on humanity's greatest achievement. They had not just survived contact with a hostile galaxy, they had taught that galaxy how to hope again. The greatest victory was not defeating their enemies, but helping their enemies defeat the worst parts of themselves. The human approach to justice had spread across 12,000 inhabited systems, proving that the courage to judge oneself honestly and help others grow was the foundation of true civilization. In becoming the galaxy's judge, humanity had learned that real power came not from the ability to punish, but from the wisdom to heal.